Hello, in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you the best controller settings for Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. Now I've got over 4 days played in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, all on a controller, so I think I've got a pretty good idea of how to make the game a little bit easier for yourself just by changing a few controller settings. I'm going to go through every one, and I'm not just going to show you what to set it to, but I'm going to explain every setting so you can make sort of informed decisions for yourself. Now this video is sponsored by Thrustmaster, who sent over their eSwap S Pro controller, which I've been using to play Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. It's an awesome controller. My favourite feature of it is that it has 2 back buttons, but these buttons are recessed. They don't accidentally trigger if you just put the controller down. You're not going to accidentally press them while you're playing, but you can map them to whatever you want. I use them for jump and crouch. So in Call of Duty, I can slide around very easily, and I can also do things like dolphin diving and opening my parachute very easily while still being able to look around and aim, keeping my thumbs on those analog sticks. It's just incredibly customizable. It feels very comfortable. I've been having a great time with it, so if you want to check it out, there's a link in the description below. Right, so let's start looking at the settings for Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. So going into the actual options, you've got 3 tabs: controller, aiming, and gameplay. The first choice is the button layout. Now there's a bunch of different presets you can use in here where you can do things like making it so you use lethals and tacticals on different buttons, or you jump and melee, you swap them around. There's lots and lots of different options. I would say if you have a controller with back paddles or back buttons like the eSwap S Pro that I'm using, a lot of the advantages from these things are kind of built into having those 2 extra buttons, so you don't really need a lot of these. But there are some things that lots of people like using. Bumper jumper in particular, lots of people quite like in a game where maybe hopping might help you to break someone's aim. But in a game like Modern Warfare Zombies, where you're not doing PvP, these aren't particularly useful. I don't find any of these very useful over the default controls and having those back buttons enabled as well. But if you do find that there's maybe one particular button that you're using a lot and it's not in the right place for you, you can remap all of the different buttons using this. Then you also have bumper ping. This is really to make it so it's much quicker for you to be able to ping, but makes it a little bit harder to use lethals and tacticals. Again, in Modern Warfare Zombies, not particularly useful because you don't need to ping very quickly. You can flip LB in the left trigger and RB in the right trigger if you'd like, so you'd end up using RB or LB to aim down the sights and fire, and then left trigger and right trigger to throw tactical and lethal grenades. I don't find that very useful. Some people like it because it means that you don't have to, have the whole travel of the trigger when you're firing guns, especially single fire guns where you're going to be hitting it very quickly. On some controllers, again, like the eSwap S Pro, you actually have trigger locks where you can make it so the trigger doesn't need to depress anywhere near as far down before it activates. That sort of like eliminates the need for this, in my opinion. But that can be useful, especially like I said, if you're using a single fire weapon. Being able to switch the fire button over to RB might make it a little bit sort of like easier on your fingers while you're firing. You can also change the stick layouts if you'd like to swap, so moving and aiming on separate ones. You can turn controller vibration on or off. I personally prefer it off just because in Zombies there's a ton of different effects, fire effects on the ground and things like that will be triggering your vibration all the time. I found it gets a little bit annoying after a while, particularly if you're playing for long play sessions. So I usually leave the vibration off. It's good for immersion, but it doesn't really help you with gameplay at all. You can also mess with the dead zone input, so if you have a little bit of stick drift, you can affect that in here. Or if you accidentally activate your triggers too much, you can add a little bit of dead zone to the triggers, and then that will mean that you have to push them a little bit further before they activate. If you have a controller that has its own software, again like the Thrustmaster software, then you can control all of this from their app, which will apply to every game rather than having to set it up in individual games like this. Right, now onto the aiming tab. Now this is one where I think there's quite a lot of controversy and quite a lot of misinformation out there, particularly from people who play PvP versions of Call of Duty very competitively. When it comes to your sensitivity, you just want to set it at what feels comfortable to you. I would pick a fairly neutral value, so something like 3 or 4, and then in-game, if you feel like you're turning a bit too slowly, just increase the sensitivity just by 1 at a time until it feels like it's fast enough for you, responsive enough for you. And then if while you're aiming you feel like the aim is shaking a little bit, like it's quite hard to keep the aim steady, then lower it by 1 until you find a nice balance where you turn fairly quickly, but you can also keep the reticle like steadily on the targets that you're trying to hit. One nice thing about zombies is that you're very rarely shooting something that's a long way away. You can often rely on auto aim for most of your aiming. So having like really high sensitivity isn't anywhere near the kind of advantage that it can be in something like Warzone or in multiplayer. Now there's a bunch of different options to change that. So ADS sensitivity is like, do you want it to be more sensitive or less sensitive while you're aiming down sights? I don't think that's very useful in zombies. You can also do things like changing the sensitivity while you're in, say, third person, stuff like that. The vertical aim axis is about whether you want to have things inverted, maybe when you're driving vehicles or you're in third person. By the way, to get in third person in zombies, just hold down on the D-pad. I feel like the game doesn't ever properly explain that, but it is a thing you can do. Then we get into more interesting ones. So tactical stance sensitivity. Again, I haven't touched this, but you can make it more or less sensitive while you're in tactical stance. I have heard for PvP, especially for multiplayer and Warzone, it might be quite a good idea to turn this quite high. So you have a choice of kind of having a very mobile way of aiming, a way where you can sort of flick around and spin around very quickly while you have tac stance activated. That could be a good idea, but for zombies, it's just not that important. You don't ever really need to use tac stance, except for a few of the camo challenges that might use it. Now, aim response curve type. This is one where I do go away from default. There's a few different aim response curves, and this is basically to do with how sensitive your control sticks are, your movement is based on your control sticks at different levels. So sometimes things like standard, like the default one, some games have this kind of idea that when you just move the control stick a tiny bit, it should move the reticle or the targeting cursor or your character very slowly at first. So if you're just sort of nudging the control stick a tiny bit, it won't make a big difference. And this allows for kind of some fine aiming where you're just making small changes. But then if you move the stick a long way, it should move it very fast. So it sort of turns the sensitivity up quite a lot because you're probably wanting to like turn a long way. And when you're turning, you don't want to be waiting for a long while. So standard kind of gives you that curve where if you're making small movements, it won't be very sensitive at all. So you can make fine adjustments. And then if you're making big movements, it will go very quickly. And dynamic kind of does something where you do the opposite of that, basically, where if you make small movements, that actually moves it quite quickly, but as you kind of make bigger movements, it slows it down a little bit. Now, linear is the one I prefer for this, and for zombies, I think linear is really good, and especially if you've got, you know, decent controller, I think linear works really well, where basically it's one-to-one. Basically, if you want to move your control stick a tiny bit, it will move the reticle a tiny bit. If you move your control stick a lot, it will move the reticle a lot. There's no kind of curve, there's nothing that the computer's doing to edit that, so you kind of learn to get a sense of how far you need to move the control stick in order to have different effects. It can feel a little bit weird at first, but I find it much more kind of natural feeling while I'm playing the game. I find it works a lot more instinctively, and I can make those kind of quick headshots, those quick little adjustments much easier, which in zombies is important. Like being able to aim at the zombies' heads very quickly, being able to aim at the weak points of the specialist zombies is really important. So I personally would have that one on linear. And again, you can change the sort of like scope and stuff like that, the slope, sorry, of the scale if you want to. Then you have a few of things like you can change sensitivity while you're focusing. That's when you're, using a sniper rifle and holding your breath. Not particularly useful in zombies at all because you're hardly ever going to be doing that. You can have the ADS sensitivity transition timing. So if you're using a different aim sensitivity while you're zoom, how long before that kicks in. But if you're not doing it, that doesn't matter. So you can just leave that on instant. And if you want, you can even have custom sensitivity for every different zoom level. But like I said, I don't do any of that stuff because I just think in zombies, it's very rare that you're trying to shoot something that's a long way away. So none of this really matters. Now for aim assist, I think in zombies, aim assist is super important and I would definitely make sure it's turned on. That's partly because obviously it's just easy to shoot lots of zombies by keep on aiming in and out. If you pull the left trigger, your aim will almost snap to one of the zombies in their center of mass. If you've got Deadshot Daiquiri, that perk on, it will aim at their head immediately. If you have aim assist off, that won't happen. So Deadshot Daiquiri will do nothing for you, and it means that you're just going to have to be aiming manually at every zombie. Aim assist in zombies is super powerful, and it does take a lot of work out of like trying to shoot individual zombies within a horde rather than just shooting all their arms and legs or something like that. And it also will help you lock onto like weak points of the specialist zombies and things like that, which is really good. So aim assist type, I just use default. Again, you can choose any of these. You've got precision focusing or black ops, which changes things a little bit. So if you have precision, it doesn't really affect your aim at all. Aim assist doesn't affect your aim until you're already pretty much aiming in the right place anyway. And then it just makes it kind of harder for you to lose that aim to move off. Focusing works really well when you're kind of just off a target. So say if you aim somewhere near a zombie, it will kind of almost feels like it's dragging you towards it, but it'll slow your aim down massively. So if you're a bit jittery, then you're not going to sort of drift off it or anything like that. And Black Ops is the kind of normal thing where if you're, say, panning past a zombie, when you're aiming at it, it will slow you down quite dramatically, and it kind of seems to increase the closer you are to it. I think default is absolutely fine, to be honest. Like, default does feel like it kind of gives you a bit of a lock on in this. It feels way more powerful than it is in multiplayer or Warzone, and it's just super useful in zombies, so I would definitely make sure that's on. If you want to have something different for third person, if you play in third person, you can do. I think assist is quite useful, where it does help you a little bit more in third person, it feels like, just because aiming in third person is a little bit trickier. Then you have motion sensor aiming if you have a controller that supports motion sensing. There are some older videos that talk about Warzone that say you should have this on even if you're not using motion sensor, because supposedly it made aim assist a bit stronger. I think they fixed that. I don't think that works anymore, so don't worry about that. Just have it turned off if you're not using it. Then the final tab is gameplay. Now this is where there's a few weird things that I would change on here that I think makes life a bit easier in zombies. The first one is tactical sprint. I actually have this on as automatic tactical sprint. Now that means that when you're running about, you will always be in tactical sprint if it's available to you, and if you've run out of tactical sprint, you'll always be sprinting when you're moving. Personally, in Warzone and multiplayer, I'm not a big fan of this, because it means that sometimes you'll like run around a corner, the enemy will hear you because you're always sprinting, and you won't be able to get your gun ready, you won't be able to ADS very quickly because you were sprinting. In zombies, none of that matters. None of those downsides really matter. But being able to move quickly in zombies is super important, because you always want to sort of keep out of the range of the zombies. So by having automatic tactical sprint on, that means that you can always make sure you're moving as fast as you possibly can, and you always want to be kind of getting away from the zombies as quickly as possible. You can put auto move forward on. This is more of kind of a accessibility thing. I don't think it's particularly useful, because if you have it on and you don't need it, often you'll find yourself accidentally moving when you don't want to. And obviously that can be super dangerous at getting you into a bad situation in zombies. Tactical sprint behavior, obviously this doesn't matter for me because I have automatic sprint, but you can choose how you activate it. Grounded mantle, I would say having this on is a really good idea. It basically means when you're near an obstacle that is able to be mantled, you can just press the jump button and that's what will let you mantle. It's useful for, you know, climbing in and out of windows and stuff. In zombies, I would definitely make sure this is on, because you don't want to get trapped behind like a waist-high wall, or trapped, you know, on the wrong side of a window or something like that, because that's, you know, when the zombies will kill you. That's when you'll get yourself in trouble. So I would make sure you leave that on. For automatic airborne mantle, there's a really good default setting on here called partial, which basically means if you're going to fall off something, then it will mantle for you, and if you're not, it won't. If you have this set to on, you will always mantle on stuff when you're sort of falling past it or jumping past it, and that can be really annoying, especially if you're trying to like drop off a building or something and you just end up grabbing onto absolutely everything. And then if you have it off, you have to press the button again to mantle all the time. So I find the partial setting absolutely perfect for that. Automatic ground mantle or hang, I just leave that on off, so you don't have it like when you're sprinting. I don't want to always be, if I just sprint up against the wall, I don't want to automatically climb over it. So I just leave that off. I think having more control over your movement in zombies is generally a good thing. Then for slide or dive behavior, I have it on tap to slide, because I don't find diving particularly useful in zombies. It's sometimes good if you're sort of jumping off a cliff and you want to open up your parachute. You know, you get a little bit more distance and you can open up your parachute a bit easier. That's pretty much the only time I dive in zombies. Sliding just makes you feel like you go a little bit faster. I'm not sure entirely how true it is. You're not needing to break anyone's aim in zombies, so all of this stuff is kind of down to choice, but I quite like just tapping to slide. When you're plunging underwater, I quite like this where, I mean, again, this is not a gameplay thing, this is just a fun thing. If you set this to free, which isn't the default, then it means that when you dive into water, you'll actually do like a proper like dive in the water and go underwater rather than just like landing in it and swimming. So you just have to do that by looking at the water. Otherwise, you have to be sprinting in order to be able to do it. So you can do it when you're not sprinting, which is nice. Parachute auto deployed, again, doesn't really matter in zombies. If you find yourself jumping off buildings and dying a lot, you can set it to always. I set it to plane only, which means if something happens where like my controller dies in Warzone, then when I drop out the plane, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to splat straight away. But if you're jumping off a building or something like that, it lets you control when you're opening your parachute. It doesn't happen automatically. Sprinting door bash, I think you always want on in zombies because, again, you never want to get trapped somewhere. So it's really helpful to be able to just sprint at a door and immediately smash it open. Otherwise, you're going to have to press interact. Ledge climb behavior just chooses, like, if you're going to climb onto a ledge, you will mantle immediately, but you won't necessarily climb up on top of it. You'll sort of hang off the edge and you'll have to press the button again to climb up. Slide cancel sprint, I have set an off, which means if you do a little slide cancel, it's not going to, if you do a slide and you're sort of going into a slide cancel, it won't stop your sprint. You'll still be able to carry on sprinting. Often in zombies, you're traveling for quite a big distance, so I think it's quite helpful to be able to just keep on sprinting the whole way. Then in combat behavior, aim down sight, that's entirely up to you. I prefer to have it on hold, so you just hold it while you're ADSing rather than toggle. But if you want, you can set it to toggle, so you'll have to press the left trigger every time you want to go in or out of ADS. Change zoom activation is basically, do you want to change it by pressing the sprint button, or do you want to do it by pressing the melee button? That's kind of more important if you have the tactical button layout on. If you've got the normal layout, I would just leave that on default. Then equipment behavior, do you want to make it so you can kind of cook a grenade by holding the button and then releasing it when you throw it? Or do you want to do the thing where you press it once and then it will start kind of cooking the grenade and then you press it again to throw it? I don't like that because sometimes you can sort of press a button on a grenade, forget you've done that, and then it'll blow up in your hand. I prefer it to just have on hold, which I think is the default. That's how it should be. Weapon mount activation, you don't really ever need to mount up your weapon in zombies, but the default is just you ADS and melee when you're near an edge. Weapon mount exit delay is kind of how long do you have to pull back on a controller before you will move away from being mounted. The default is just medium. Tactical stance is something I think is important, and I've changed this. So the default is ADS and the down button, which basically means to go into the tactical thing where you turn your gun on its side and you can move it a bit quicker, you have to be aiming using a left trigger and then press down on the D-pad, which means that you've completely taken your left thumb off the left thumbstick. And if I have it like that, I just never use tactical stance. This is a new thing in Call of Duty, and it's, you know, something I want to be using as much as possible. So I've changed it to be left trigger and then click in the right stick, which means, you know, I'm aiming anyway. I'm not taking my thumbs off any of the sticks. I can do it whenever I want. It is useful with some of the bigger guns, particularly if you pick up a wall buy or a gun from the mystery box and it's got an annoying scope on it. You can just put it in tactical stance and then you can ignore that scope and just keep on using it sort of in close quarters. I really like the tactical stance thing. I think it's pretty good. But yeah, setting it to ADS and melee seems to be the way forwards. Tactical stance behavior, you can choose the default. I've left it on is on toggle, which means you put it on and it'll stay like that until you turn it off. You can change it so it just lasts your entire life until you die and then it will reset, or you can do it so it only works while you're holding the aim down sights button, and then when you let go of that, it will go back to normal aiming. I prefer it on toggle. I kind of normally am in a situation where I always want tactical stance, or I'm in a situation where I want normal aim down sights, ADS. And if you want to change it, you just click in the right stick, so it's not a pain at all. Interact reload behavior, another one I change, and I think this is super important for zombies. I would leave it on prioritize interact. Now, this basically means that if you tap to reload or you tap to interact with something, it will happen immediately. And the game kind of chooses which one you're going to do if maybe you need to reload, but also there's something to pick up. With prioritize interact, it will choose to always pick something up. Now, I think this is super useful just because there's lots of times where you need to reload really quickly or you need to interact with something quickly. Thinking about, maybe using the pack punch while you're being attacked by zombies, trying to res a friend, trying to pick up something like some plates or something off the ground. Any time where you're going to have to hold the button to do that is kind of irritating. Like, it's kind of a problem. Now, this isn't perfect. Sometimes you will want to reload and you'll end up picking a plate off the ground. But if you just kind of get in the habit of holding the button to reload, then it seems to work better, but sometimes you'll be able to tap to reload when you want. If it is a real problem where you keep reloading when you want to pick something up, or vice versa, then you can change this. So say if you're having a problem where you keep reloading when you want to pick something up, then change it to tap to interact. So it'll never reload unless you hold the button. If you have the problem where you keep wanting to reload, but it keeps picking something up, you could change it to prioritize reload, which basically means you'll normally reload unless you really don't need to at all, but then you need to hold a button to interact. I think that's quite dangerous in zombies, particularly like I said, things like trying to pack punch something, trying to use a mystery box when lots of zombies are around, trying to pick up some armor or something like that. You don't really want to have to be stopping and holding the button for a second. Armor plate behavior, I quite like apply all. So again, this is a change from the default. So that just means if you hold the button once, you'll just put in all of your armor that you've got available rather than having to press it for every individual plate. I just think that's better. It doesn't take very long to plate up in zombies, and you need to be doing it quite a lot because you lose your armor quite quickly in zombies. So that just seems like it makes sense a little bit. ADS stick swap is a little bit weird. It's basically as soon as you do your ADS, it changes your aiming to your left control stick rather than it being movement. I find that a little bit bizarre. I think it's an accessibility option. I wouldn't mess with that, personally. Backpack control is something that I can see people changing. Basically, the default is that when you're using a backpack, so you press down on the D-pad to open it, you use the D-pad to select between the different boxes. That's quite good because it means you can still move using your left stick in case you start getting attacked or something like that. You can, if you want, change it to using the stick, which probably will let you kind of move stuff quicker. But it has a weird effect in this of it automatically moves you forwards. So kind of if you look in your backpack, you will start just moving forwards, and obviously you can still look around with the right stick, but you can use the left stick to interact with stuff in your backpack. I would only do that if you have a real problem with using the D-pad. If not, it just seems like, again, you're kind of letting the computer take over a bit in a way that's going to cause some problems. It's probably going to be a bad thing. Depleted ammo weapon switch. This basically switches your gun automatically as soon as you completely run out of ammo. So not when you use up the magazine, but when you've completely run out of ammo, it will automatically switch. This is a preference thing. I like leaving it on because I don't think it's ever really caused me problems. If you've run out of ammo, it's better to switch to a gun than not. But if you do have like kind of an annoying gun in your second slot, like something, I don't know, a sniper rifle or an LMG or something like that, that's going to slow you down a lot, maybe you might want to turn this off. Quick C4 detonation. Basically, this lets you, after you've thrown your C4, if you hold the button, then you will blow up all of the C4 at the same time. Or you can do it so it just detonates one at a time. I personally prefer just have them grouped, so if you throw 2 bits of C4 down, you can hold it and blow them both up at the same time, or you can throw one and then hold it to blow it up. It's up to you. Manual fire behavior. This is quite an interesting one, and I only just changed this one today. This basically means for guns that maybe have single fire, so semi-automatics, or guns that have burst fire, you can make it so rather than having to keep on pressing the trigger over and over, you can just hold it and it will keep on firing. Now, it's important to note, you will fire slower than you would do if you were just pressing the button quickly over and over again. But if you're say fighting loads and loads of zombies, and especially if you're grinding out camo, so you're doing it for like thousands of zombies, this will save your finger a little bit. This will make you feel a little bit better. It's not the most efficient way to fire those guns, but it does mean that you don't have to keep on pressing the trigger over and over again. So I kind of like that. And if you have it on hold, you can still choose to press it quickly if you want to. It just gives you that option. So I'm not really sure why you would not have that on. Then there's some vehicle behavior things. These aren't particularly important. They're just to do with the cameras for the vehicles. So you can choose how long it takes before it recenters. If you move the camera away in a vehicle, say to look left or right, how long does it take to go back to it? Short delay seems fine. The camera initial position, do you want it to be free look where you can, if you're looking left, then it will look left straight away, or do you want it to automatically go behind it? I just think free look is absolutely fine for that. And how do you want to lean out of it? You can choose between melee or the aim down sights button. This one, again, is just personal choice. There's not really any benefit to either of those. Then for the overlay things, when you're doing the map, you can set it up so if you want, so you hold the map button to keep the map up. I find that a bit annoying, because especially in zombies, often you'll want to bring the map up and then interact with it, like look around on it, select contracts, things like that. So I think toggle is better, where you just press the map button once, look around with it, and then remember to close it. But if you're the sort of person that often gets stuck in the map, and you panic a little bit because you're getting hit by zombies and you can't work out how to close it, then you could switch that to hold and it would stop that from happening. And then the ping wheel delay, if you use the ping wheel, say to invite people into a squad and stuff like that, you can choose how long you have to hold the ping button to get that to come up. So you can choose it from short to longest. You can even turn it off. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. And same thing for the delay when you're pinging to do danger. If you double tap ping, it will set like a danger ping, which is good for showing there's a particular enemy somewhere. You can choose how long it takes before, how much time you have before that will count as two separate ones, basically. Kill streak wheel behavior, same sort of thing. Do you want it to be toggle or hold? So if you're holding right on a D-pad, do you want it to be sort of you hold it and then you get all your kill streak wheel and you can look at it? Or do you want to make it so you have to keep holding right on a D-pad while you look at them before you select them? I think hold is fine for that. So that is everything. That is every single controller setting and what I've got them set to on zombies and why I've got them set there. If you've got any questions about any of them, let me know in the comments. If you're looking for a new controller to play with zombies, check out the Thrustmaster eSwap S Pro controller. I've been using it for it. I'm nearly done with Borealis, so I've been using it a huge amount. And it's been absolutely great. It's been working really well. Check out the link in the description below if you want to see that. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.